Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Free Lunch Friday. My name is RyanWallick, and I'm the speaker coordinator for Free Lunch Friday. And now on to our speaker bio. Ajit George is the founder of Second Chances Farm LLC, an organization focused on hiring and giving turnkey entrepreneurial opportunities to people returning from prison after serving their sentence through the creation of indoor hydroponic vertical farms or plant factories. Second Chances produces chemical-free produce and hemp year-round in local communities and minimizes the carbon footprint of transporting produce. Ajit is also the author of Magic of the Red Carpet, a 500-plus page book in which he shares his unlikely journey from organizing TEDx Wilmington to founding Second Chances Farm. Ajit has over 40 years of experience in creative marketing, strategic planning, and business development in various arenas from broadcasting and events to nonprofits and real estate development. Please welcome Ajit.
Thank you for this wonderful opportunity and a virtual hello to everybody that is joining us. So I thought I would share a little bit of background to lead us into my entrepreneurial journey. I came as a 16-year-old from India to go to the University of Delaware, like you all are. But I was 2 years ahead of you when I joined because I had skipped 2 grades because my mother made me do that. I wouldn't recommend skipping grades ever. But I came to the University of Delaware, which is where I started my undergraduate work. And I mentioned that because that is where that was the first place I came in the United States. I've been here now 50 years, so it's been an interesting journey. And during this 50 years, I started my first real job was with WHYY in Philadelphia, which was both public radio station initially and then public television station, where I was I was director of development, where I was overseeing fundraising for the radio station, and then the director of marketing and development for the public radio station and the public television station. And in that capacity, I learned a skill that I recommend highly, which I didn't think was going to be a great skill, but it's helped me. I had to learn the art of selling virtually for something that was free. As you know, in the United States, radio and television are free. There's no licenses. Anybody can watch it. So I had to get on those hated begathons and organize them, actually, because that was my job, and persuade people who didn't need to give money to listen to us or watch us to give money. And so I became a very good beggar. I mean, and I use that word proudly these days because what it gave me was a skill of raising money. And if you're going to be an entrepreneur, and anybody who's in this is thinking of being an entrepreneur, it's not the strength of ideas, although that really does matter. It is the ability to raise money. So there are lots of very smart people with great ideas, particularly business plans written on beautiful paper or presentations with PowerPoints, and well-researched. But if you don't have the ability to raise capital, and raising capital requires you to beg. And so I would say to you, learn the art of begging professionally and the art of begging unprofessionally. And the word unprofessionally means that if you have to plead for, and we'll come back to that when I finish my talk, you really need to make sure that you can raise capital. And raising capital, and I didn't realize in 1976 to 1980, when I was at public television and public radio, which I was 22 when I started, and I ended up when I was 26 in 1980. I didn't realize how important that skill set would be. So in 1980, in 1976, I also bought my first piece of real estate, which as an immigrant was the only way that I was going to acquire capital. I was able to buy a house at that point for a relatively small amount of money, but it seemed like it was a lifetime. It was a 30-year mortgage. I bought it for $17,600, and I put 3% down FHA down payment, and I had a 30-year mortgage. I never thought I would live long enough to pay off the mortgage. I was scared to have a 30-year mortgage. But what that real estate did is enabled me to build equity, and over the next 4 years, 76 to 80, I ended up acquiring several pieces of real estate, because real estate is something that you can buy with a small down payment, often 20%, sometimes less, sometimes more. And therefore, it's an opportunity for those who don't have capital to be able to leverage as long as the real estate doesn't depreciate or doesn't go down in value. That is not a guarantee. Sometimes it goes down, sometimes it goes up. And so I essentially, by 1980, I ended up being in this interesting place in my life where I was 26 years old, and I had concluded that I had done enough fundraising and public nonprofit work for a lifetime, at least working for it, and that and because I had learned so many skills raising money on air and also doing corporate underwriting, I decided I would leave that and go full-time into real estate development. And at 26, I really felt I knew everything I needed to know. I was incredibly cocky. And like many of you who have mastered Excel spreadsheets, and by the way, no Excel spreadsheets in 1980, there were no computers. There was everything was hand done and hand typed. If you had a electric typewriter, you were considered having a state-of-the-art device. So in 1980, I learned everything from a practical kind of experience and having bought some real estate, I went into real estate development. And so, and I tell you that because, and I didn't think I could fail because I was young, I was smart, and cocky. And those are dangerous things because I can tell you, I'm going to be 66 on May 10th. And what I will tell you is what I've learned in the subsequent period. Being young is really wonderful because you get a chance to fail and you do get a second chance or third chance to recover, but it doesn't give you the wisdom that only comes from failure and life's experience. No amount of university education and no amount of book reading will prepare you for failures, and you have to fail to succeed. So if you are listening to me and don't want to listen to failures, you should probably tune off this talk at this point. The second part of this equation was the word is that you by 26, I thought I knew everything I needed to be successful. In reality, now that I am 66, I really didn't have any idea. I tell people between 26 and 30, I was pretty sure I knew everything. At 40, at my 40th birthday, I questioned whether I knew it. 50, for sure, I knew very little. And by I got to 60, I was convinced I never will learn enough to be smart enough. So it's useful to have that perspective because you will make mistakes. And if you don't try, you won't make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you've thought it out. The key is how you recover from mistakes and resilience, all right? And I tell you that because from 1976 to 82, I bought a lot of real estate, thinking things would never be different. It just looked like the world was in a perfect trajectory where I could just I was getting credit. Banks were lending me money. I was buying real estate. I think I had 22 properties, and it really looked like I was on an unbelievable threshold. And then all of a sudden, the economy changed. Interest rates went up. It's hard for you all to believe this, between 18 and 21%. So if you borrowed money at 7%, and it suddenly went to 21%, there is no income projections that you can have, including rental income particularly, that is going to increase by the same proportionality. And because I was undercapitalized, because the reason I got into real estate was because I really didn't have the capital to start a business, because I was able to leverage 80% from a bank. It meant that my income was never going to cover it. So my first catastrophic failure was figuring out how to unwind my real estate holdings without being bankrupt, and essentially having to give up properties I thought would be phenomenal, but I could not afford to keep them. And so I managed to avoid bankruptcy, but I ended up losing everything but the very first piece of real estate I owned, which I bought in 1976, which I have kept to this date to remind me how far I have come. It's a house that I rent now, but and I have no debt after 30 plus years. I have paid off it. But it just reminded me that how far I've come and how much the world has changed. And so I'm going to encourage all of you who are thinking about entrepreneurship to be prepared for the unexpected. And so after that particular series of experiences, in 82, I decided to give up developing, buying what I will call rental housing. And I got an opportunity to get into resort development. And I spent from 1982 to 2010, end of 2009, actually. So a significant part of my time developing resort real estate in the British Virgin Islands, in the Caribbean, in a small island called Virgin Gorda. And I had the privilege, among other properties, to take a 146-acre piece of land that was spectacularly beautiful, that's on the waterfront, because nobody thought it could be developed, and it was beautiful. It took me 14 years to get approval from the government. So it took me from 82 to 96 to get approvals to subdivide it into a residential high-end luxury resort community. And I spent from 96 to 2009-10 developing it, including roads and infrastructure. And just when I finished all the road and infrastructure was when the end of the world occurred with the economic crisis of 2009 and on the stuff. Fortunately, I still have a house that's on the waterfront in the British Virgin Islands. So I do have something to show for all my achievement. But you can never be prepared for the end of the world when all the banks are in trouble and Lehman Brothers goes out of business. And that's in 2000. Most of you were just coming up, just growing up in that period. And it really looked like the end of the world, not unlike where we are right now. But the truth was, I made the decision. I was 55 at that point, I guess, and 56, that I had enough fun developing real estate. It has been a great experience. I made money, I lost money, I made money, and I thought I didn't need to do one more cycle of that. And so in 2010, when I was commuting, by the way, every other week from Wilmington, Delaware to the British Virgin Islands. So I spent 26 weeks there a year and 26 weeks here, but it was in this very fragmented life. So I spent a lot of time on planes. And so for a variety of reasons, I ended up deciding I don't want that lifestyle anymore. Decided to be 2010 and decided to do a couple of different things. One of which was I chaired a marketing company that had offices in Tucson and Arizona and San Francisco for an East Coast operation. And then I also, at the same time in 2011, got a license from TED. TED was granting licenses to organizers like me to organize TED-like events in communities like Wilmington. And so from 2011 to 2018, I organized this TEDx Talks in Wilmington called TEDx Wilmington. They were exceptionally successful. I did 32 events. I had 490 speakers who gave 469 talks, and they had and in that period, as of, I think, this past week, we had 29 million views around the world on YouTube for our talks from TEDx Wilmington. And now, for those of you who know how small Wilmington is, Wilmington's population is 70,000, the state's at 900,000. It's pretty amazing that we could take ideas from around the world, because we had speakers from 40 countries and 40 states come to Wilmington, and have 29 million people view it. So it was a pretty remarkable experience. But what really, the unlikely journey out of that, there were two TEDx talks that I heard in that. One of them was given by a gentleman who was somebody who had spent 15 years in prison, had come out of prison, rehabilitated himself, and gave an opportunity to rehabilitate. And then he ended up getting this amazing opportunity by the United States Department of Justice to work as an employee. And he became the first convicted felon that the U.S. Department, or maybe the second one, the U.S. Department of Justice hired. And he ended up being hired by the U.S. District Court, which is the federal court in Wilmington, to actually oversee reentry, which is a pretty remarkable place to come from being a convicted felon for 15 years and overseeing reentry in the U.S. District Court in Delaware. He gave a talk about second chances and redemption, which was really a powerful talk about why second chances makes a chance. And the same TEDx event, which happened to be in August of 2016, there was a gentleman from Philadelphia who had started something that I had never heard about before prior to me inviting him to talk about a concept called indoor vertical farming. I had no idea that you could do farming indoor, no idea that you could do it vertically, didn't even understand the concept. Always get confused between horizontal and vertical. I finally have gotten vertical right. And then we ended up, he talked, and what he really was talking about, it being urban farming and how growing food in urban environments like Philadelphia and Wilmington could change the way we grow food 52 weeks a year, 365 days, because we can grow it locally without having any pollution, any chemicals, and we don't have food miles, and we can reduce carbon footprint. Sexy, interesting, fascinating idea. So these were two unrelated talks that I had people invited the speakers. I had gone to his place in Philadelphia after I invited him, and they both gave their talks at the same event. And I was sitting in the audience even though I knew both were giving talks, and even though I was the organizer, and hit me, gee, I wondered, this is an interesting idea. And by way of, and the other little piece of background information on me is I'm a passionate wine collector. I'm also a passionate foodie. And I was the founding chairman of Meals on Wheels in Delaware, which I did that in 1989, and served as a founding chairman for 17 years or 18 years until 2007. And in that capacity, I organized a lot of benefits for Meals on Wheels, almost invariably involving chefs, food, and in wine. And when I retired in 2007, and when I came back to Wilmington in 2010, I received a grant from Longwood Foundation to organize a brand new series of food and wine events called the MidAtlantic Wine and Food Festival. And I did that from 2011 to 15. And just to give you a scale of the event, we had chefs from 6 continents. We didn't get somebody from Antarctica. That year we had 90 chefs, 20 winemakers. We did 44 events in 4 states in 4 days consecutively. So it was a logistical event. So I had this connection, food and wine. And one of the events was held inside a Baylor Women's Correctional Institution, which is Delaware's statewide prison. In the process of doing that event, I became, for the first time, I had no connection to the prison community. Knowingly, I didn't know anybody who had gone to prison. I had never visited a prison. I had no particular interest in doing something with a prison, but organizing this event required me to spend a lot of time visiting the prison to get the logistics off. And at the end of the event, which was May 14th of 2015, the warden got up and thanked everybody who came, which was all the corporate leaders that I had invited who paid $150 to eat dinner inside a prison along with the prison inmates, and said, I hope you guys over the next several years can help me. Help me to the conversation about building a greenhouse inside the prison. And our U.S. Senator Chris Coons was with me at that day, standing behind the podium. Chris and I raised a lot of money for charity, so I said, Chris, let's step up to the podium, see whether we can raise money. And in 3 minutes, we raised all the money we needed to build for the greenhouse at Baylor. It was a completely unexpected surprise to us. That was not part of our goal, but it became, if you may, the seed of an idea. So one of the things I'm going to take a little pause here to remind everybody is, you may have a mission, you may have a purpose, you may have an idea, but sometimes the things that happen along the journey, including things that you get distracted by or accident journeys, might be seeds for even better ideas. And just remember this greenhouse, which I had no intention of building, had no intention of being inside a prison in May 15, 20, became really the catalyst really for what I have done in Second Chances Farm. And then I did a TEDx event in Baylor that summer, and then we now are into the summer of 2016 with these 2 TEDx talks that I just talked about. And so I started getting intrigued by this whole idea of seeing how I could connect indoor vertical farming with the idea of giving second chances to people who return from prison. And among the things I learned was Delaware, like the rest of the country, has a high recidivism rate. The recidivism is defined as people who are, if you may, are people who are within a community who are returning from prison, after they complete their term. And within 3 years in Delaware, 60 to 70% of those people return to prison. That is a high number. It's not unlike most other states. More importantly, the average, just so you know, the cost of keeping somebody in prison last year in Delaware was $53,000. It's a lot of money, more than the University of Delaware's tuition. And so I approached this not as a bleeding heart liberal. I approached this as a capitalist because I'm proud to be a capitalist. I thought this was a huge misuse of capital, human capital, because keeping people in prison didn't get capital, but really as much as with a financial capital. And I thought if we could find a way to interrupt this by preventing recidivism, while I couldn't solve the school to prison pipeline, that was too big a project, perhaps I could make an impact on the prison to in the recidivism. Spent a lot of time researching it from the summer of 2016. And on my 63rd birthday in May of 2017, I invited 63 friends and I laid out my vision. And my vision was that by my 70th birthday, which would have been 7 years from that date, I wanted to create 70 compassionate capitalists. And because it was my 70th birthday, there was also a biblical injunction of 70. So it didn't matter whether you're religious or not, but by 70, I wanted to create 70 capitalists. But I would only create them from people who were returning citizens. So the idea was I would only hire returning citizens. And I would do it by creating one, perhaps two vertical farms. The truth is, in May 10th, 2017, if you had asked me now, did I really know what I was doing in May 10, 20? Absolutely not. And that's with a lot of experience. I can tell you for a fact that I was clueless compared to what I am now. But the truth is, if you had asked me in May 10, 2017, I knew everything that I just couldn't imagine that I would be surprised by what I knew. And so leading that journey now, and I'll bring it to Second Chances Farm, I decided in 2018 that I would do this. 2017, I incorporated Second Chances Farm as a Delaware LLC. So that's sort of an very simple but important legal step. I started to say, okay, I started to look at what does it mean to create a farm. I started looking at 5,000 to 10,000 square foot space because that sort of seemed to be what was minimum. I started to explore how I would hire returning citizens. I'd never hired returning citizens. That's the term for people who are coming out of prison. And how would they deal with the challenges of reentry? Because giving a job is just one element of a reentry person, because they generally have addiction issues, they have issues, lots of housing issues, all of which I could not solve. So I needed others to help me. So I reached out it. And so I made the decision, worked on it in 2017 and hard, and said, okay, I think I understand what I need. And in 2018, I decided to stop organizing TEDx Wilmington events. And my last event was November 2018 for TEDx Wilmington, because I needed to put myself full-time to do this startup and raise capital. And so very boldly on my 65th birthday, which was May 10th last year, I invited 150 plus people. I said, again, really not fully understanding now what I now know, but I thought I knew everything I needed to know, to announce that I am opening Second Chances Farm, invited people to support me. I introduced some of the returning citizens that I thought I was going to hire. So it was an opportunity to have a great birthday party, but also to announce to people what I was going to do. And so that journey left me to look for a building, and all the buildings we looked were complicated because I wanted to be in an opportunity zone, which is a federally designated area of the socially disadvantaged community, and the buildings were not particularly attractive or required too much capital. I ended up, through a combination of circumstances, running into a 47,500 square foot building, which is, just so you guys have scale, is over an acre under roof. But I got really favorable terms on it. I got to lease purchase it over 128 months from the owners, which was a nonprofit that really liked my mission. And I agreed to keep their name on the building, which was the Opportunity Center. They were a sheltered workshop that started in 1960 for what was a sheltered workshop for handicapped and what they call handicapped and retarded people. And they felt that we were being a sheltered workshop for a different community. We are a for-profit company. We are a public benefit company, which is a specific designation in Delaware. And we are, so we want, the reason we are not a nonprofit is because I believe nonprofits, it's a very hard economic model to sustain because you raise capital every year. And so what we really wanted to do was to be able in a position to raise capital every year, not do that, but to be economically sustainable. And for that, we wanted to raise enough capital so that we could sustain ourselves with ongoing revenue. And so that's really what we have done. And so we wanted to do. I mean, we haven't fully done it yet. And so we are that. So we are for-profit, public benefit opportunities fund, and we got the building. We call the Opportunity Center, 47,500 square foot in Northeast Wilmington in a very economically challenged neighborhood. And we moved in it on September 4th, 2019. We then put a prototype farm in there to learn how to check for a prototype, because it's and then on November 18th, we invited the governor, the mayor, the county executive, and the political and business leadership of the state to join us, along with 300 of our best friends and enemies, to come in for a ceremony called the Ladybug Dedication. We bought 10,000 ladybugs, gave everybody some ladybugs, because ladybugs is the way you control infestation inside a indoor vertical farm. That's one of the ways. And we had everybody, it's part of the ceremony, release 10,000 ladybugs. It was mostly marketing, but it also had a symbolic purpose of communicating that we did not use chemicals, pesticides, or herbicides. So that was November 18th. Fast forward the story to where we are on January 6th. We hired our first 10 returning citizens. They joined us. By the end of the month, I had ordered and received we wanted to create a production farm as opposed to a prototype farm, and that production farm is roughly 2,500 square feet, and we put 50 modules that are 6 levels high. If you go to our website, you'll see some pictures on it, secondchancesfarm.com. And what we really did is build to set all that up by February 7th, with the help of the 10 returning citizens. We then had what did we do? And then we planted 200,000 seeds, 7th, 8th, and 9th of February. And then obviously transplanted the seeds. And the reason we planted the seeds on that date is that's the earliest we could have planted, because we needed to set up the farm. But we also had a start date, which happened to be 6 weeks later, which happened to be March 16th. A very, very fun things. I see a flashing screen. Ladybug is indeed Delaware's official bug. And I see somebody on this. So it's very smart. It was, and that helped us also from a marketing point to have the official bug, the ladybug. And so we planted it, we nurtured it. Our goal was to exclusively sell to restaurants, high-end restaurants, our produce, because ours was what we call post-organic, which is better than organic. The reason we didn't go for organic certification was because USDA organic certification allows a certain amount of pesticides. We did not want to use them, so we call ourselves better than organic or post-organic. And the plants were looking good. We pre-sold our produce, and we're going to wrap this up so you guys can ask questions because we're coming up to the present. And so the story really on March 16th was our harvest date. March 17th was our delivery date. At 3 o'clock, I got the news that the governor issued the executive order ordering all restaurants to be shut down at 8 o'clock on March 16th. We were delivering to restaurants on March 17th. And we went from having 100% sold out to no orders to be taken. And so we have a perishable commodity. It's not like we could can it or freeze it. Lettuce doesn't do very well in the freezer. Arugula doesn't do well. Basil doesn't do well at all in the refrigerator. It goes black very quickly. So we lost all our customers that evening. So overnight, I had to decide whether to shut down, close our startup. And if you know anything about a startup, if you shut it down, you might as well, 99% time, there's no chance to restarting it. Not knowing how big this tsunami was for the coronavirus, but now I knew that if I shut down, I would just be a footnote as one of the people that died during this. So I said, what can I do to keep it alive, and how can I self-produce? Because I couldn't sell it to restaurants, I couldn't sell it to hotels, I could not sell it to institutions, and we didn't have enough quantity to sell to somebody like a ShopRite. We had $1 million purchase order that ShopRite was willing to execute, but our production farm was too small for that, so we needed a larger farm. So overnight, our team improvised, brainstormed, and we came up with the idea of trying a farm-to-home delivery program. Because we had the produce that was beautiful, organic, beautiful, fresh. We created a homepage on our website. We did a marketing campaign and shot some videos, posted some stuff on Facebook on Tuesday night at 5:30. We had this on the 17th. We had stuff ready to go by 5:30 on our website, on our social media. We sent out letters to all of our friends that we had on a mailing list, which was really important to have a mailing list of friends and enemies, anybody who would be willing to share it. So we had a MailChimp list. We blasted it out. We had no idea whether anybody would buy it. Now, just remember, we were geared for bulk orders to restaurants. We had no packaging, and we had no intention of being retail. And more importantly, we had no idea how we would deliver. And I figured I would solve all that problems when we started to get orders. Much to my surprise, the next morning we had some orders. And within a few days, by the end of, if you can just think of a 4-week period, we actually gone from, it's exactly 4 weeks last Friday when we have our 4th harvest from March 16th. We now have over 250 home delivery customers. We sold out every single piece of lettuce. In fact, we're short because produce cannot be managed like a production factory. Sometimes they are perkier than others. We have going through our first cycle of renewals now. So we send renewal letters to renew the subscribers who subscribe from March 17th to the 23rd. And as a result, we have worked 7 days a week here compared to every other business. We are an essential business because we are a farm that produces stuff. All of our returning citizens were gainfully employed. I worked every day here except for Easter Sunday. Our challenge is finding packaging, doing all the things, finding people to deliver. And I personally manage the delivery by looking at orders that came in, and we found a software that is available to purchase reasonably for delivery, so we can group it by zip codes and addresses. So we had to learn how to improvise. And so we are alive. Meanwhile, we were supposed to close on some major capital in the month of March. And of course, all of that didn't happen. So we would have gone out of business if we did not have farm-to-home delivery. So we are staying alive right now because of the farm-to-home delivery, which we had no intention of keeping. And the good news is some of the people who are getting deliveries are actually people who are affluent, and they've reached out to us and said when this is all over, they want to come visit us and potentially invest because they really realize that there potentially is very disruptive, these things happening about the food supply. They had never thought about food supply before, and locally grown food that is fresh and home delivered. They also like the taste. We did a survey. Last thing I'll end up with, we did a survey monkey to our 200 plus subscribers about a week ago. And we got 106 responses, which is a staggering number of responses. 86% of the people said that the food that we had is substantially tasted better than what it is. So we might ended up with a whole new business opportunity and a business channel that we didn't in. We don't have a choice right now. We need to make sure that's closer to 200 to 250 going until the world sometime restores to normality. But it's clearly an unbelievable story, and I'm happy to answer questions about my journey into this adventure.
All right, so now if you have questions, please put them in the chat and then I will read them off. I guess I have a question to start, if we could. So I follow like I'm on your MailChimp and I follow your Instagram and everything. And I love to see like when someone visits your farm, you'll post like a picture and you're really engaging with the community. So I guess my question is like, how do you take the time to really build that community, and what are your goals with that?
First, you have to have an open invitation that I invite anybody. You don't have to have money. So I've had the poorest of the poor and the wealthiest of the wealthy. And I've learned some of the poorest of the poor might know somebody who knows somebody who is wealthy. But the reality is there's no judgment I make. I said, I only do one-on-one tours, meaning I don't do group tours because I want to give attention to people. Because you can't build relationships if you're not one-on-one. And then you have people like, people are introverts who don't ask questions. If an extrovert asks all the questions. And I learn a lot by people's questions because I learn what is it that I need to communicate better? Because one of the big challenges people have trouble understanding, we have no soil. We are soilless. And so I make the point we are soilless. I start the presentations now by saying there are 4 things you need to know about indoor vertical farms. You need artificial light, which is provided in our case by state-of-the-art LED lights. You need water. You need nutrients, which is the periodic chart that all of you went to school, the chemistry lab, so it's the 14 elements of the nutrient chart. And the 5th thing is CO2, because the plants consume so much CO2. Normally, you would never add CO2, but you have to add CO2 for the plants to live because there's so many plants that consume too much CO2. So I start with that presentation. I talk about there's no soil, which is really a hard concept for people to accept. So I open each layer to show them how much water is, that is only water, it's continuous, and that we add the nutrients to the water. Plants, unlike humans, I say, never overeat. That's why they never get fat. They only take the nutrients they need and they pass on the water without that they don't consume. So I've learned how to make presentations to it. It has taught me, but it's also creating a community of people for me that are well-wishers. And the truth is, you never know who's poor or wealthy at any given day, who's important or not. We have suspended our tours, obviously, because of the coronavirus now. But as soon as it's open, we'll end up doing it again, and we will absolutely welcome. It has been it's an important part of what I build community and not just for raising capital, although that's always there, but it's always from a conversation about. It's really around learning. Why are people curious to take time to come and visit in particularly a neighborhood which is not an easy to access and potentially could be seen as dangerous, even though I don't see it as being dangerous. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So we have a question. How did you go from a foodie to a farmer? Coming from a business background, how did you manage the technical aspect of growing a vertical farm?
So I will start by saying that I'm still managing the technical aspects of growing a vertical farm. The answer is the vertical farm industry is relatively new. One could argue it's 20 plus years. So the first real vertical farm industry in the United States is in our backyard in Kennett Square. It's the mushroom factory. Mushrooms was the first indoor vertical farm industry, but it was mushrooms, very precise, very specific. It's dark, ironically enough. So it's because they don't use as many lights. So that was the first indoor. There are several large vertical farms in the country, but as an industry, it's a much more homegrown industry. People did it in basements. They did it in things, but it's only in the last 5 years that industry grown. There are some experts who have done it now for 5+ years, but frankly, it's pretty hard to find. There's a fair amount of some literature, but it's really learning to say the key question to be an entrepreneur, and really the answer to that question is to say, I don't know. And what I've learned is when I say I don't know, and can you tell me what's the pH I need? What's what people are willing to answer? I should point out, since this is a University of Delaware conversation, is we have struck a partnership with the College of Ag, Department of Plant Sciences, Dr. Eric Irvin, who has really been just phenomenal to work with, and that Department of Plant Sciences is creating a whole new controlled environment agriculture program that is scheduled to start on May 1st, which of course it'll be delayed, but they hired, after a national search, somebody to come in and lead the program, because Cornell has a major controlled environmental agriculture study program, a sustainable agriculture program, and the University of Delaware would like to be one of that, being a land-grant university, to be part of it. And so what you have now is this interesting opportunity to partner. And what we did is work with the university, which does not have an indoor vertical farm. And we have set this up so that you can, the university will have an office here for the new person who's heading the control environment. We'll have space for their graduate students and undergraduate students to do it. And because they don't have an indoor vertical farm, our indoor vertical farm will be their indoor vertical farm. So it's a partnership. It's a mutually beneficial because I'll have access to some of the best brains. They'll have access to a real working farm without putting capital. And it's a real opportunity for both of us to benefit.
Awesome. Okay, so Heather asked, how is fundraising and benefiting the society with Meals on Wheels helped you succeed in your business today?
It helped me to learn how to pitch from WHYY, my public radio, to learn about, so my pitch on Meals on Wheels, how I got involved in 1989 was there was a waiting list for the elderly, which didn't make any sense to me because you can't eat 10 meals at the end of the month if you suddenly on the run. And the average cost of the meal then was, I'm going to say it's $4 for a home delivered meal. And it made no sense. So my goal was to eliminate hunger for the elderly by raising it. I figured in a rich society like us, no elderly, no senior citizen should go hungry for $4 a meal, considering volunteers for home delivered. So I learned how to pitch that. And now, ironically, some of the people who help me raise money are actually some of the people who are actually order some of the home delivered programs. I think it's pretty funny for me. I haven't really focused on it, and I probably should think about my journey from Meals on Wheels home delivery to home delivery with produce. It's a different kind, but in many ways it has some of the same characteristics. And it is accidental that I did the home delivery. It's accidental that I'm a farmer, but here I am. Life's journey is all about coincidences, and you need to take advantage of that.
Yep, I agree. All right, we had someone message me a question. They said you are an inspiring example of resilience. What are some personal practices that you put in place to keep moving forward and growing in the face of adversity?
Failure is not permanent. That's the most important thing. It's not a fatal condition. Unfortunately, most of the people I know, when they fail, they don't think they'll ever recover. When you're young, it's a great time to fail. I encourage each of you to fail at least 2 or 3 times before age 30. It will harden you up for the lives of reality. If you haven't failed, it means you haven't tried. You haven't taken risks. That's important lesson. The other part of it is just remember, when the sun goes down every day, the sun comes up. So you could be bankrupt. The great thing about the United States, although I've never been bankrupt, but came close to it, if you're bankrupt, you can start again. There's a real opportunity. In many ways, bankruptcy allows you to really start over again. And so there's no debtor's prison. So I encourage people to take calculated risks. Don't be stupid. But the flip side is you got to convince yourself that you are on a mission, that you want to do something that you're passionate about. If you are working to be an entrepreneur for money, you will probably not make enough money for all the hours that you'll put in until you hit it big. And very few of us will hit it big. You got to have passion. And if God don't have passion, go work for someone else because that's on the stuff. So passion is the real ingredient for resilience. Recognizing that failure is not fatal. Those are all important steps in life. I wake up every morning. I'm very active on Facebook. I post 6 motivational posts that I read. I read a bunch of motivational posts, and I post 6 of them every morning on my Facebook page. My Facebook page is open. You're welcome to come. It's Ajit, Matthew, George. Welcome to come look at it. I do it in the morning, regardless of how bad the day yesterday was, because it sets the tone for the day. Because regardless of how bad, in my case, on the morning of the 17th, it looked like 5 years work, 3 years of hard capital. I had put incredible amount of money and time into this startup. On the morning of the 17th, which by the way is exactly a month ago from today, this moment, if you talked to me a month ago, it looked very bleak because we hadn't quite figured out. We had not even figured out how to deliver, let alone thought about we didn't know where to deliver, which counties to deliver. We ended up delivering it in northern Newcastle County and southern Chester County and southern Delaware County. So you got to have faith and you got to have some amount of Pollyanna in you to believe that you will find a way, which is really requires suspending judgment. And that's hard when you're failing. And that is really the hard part. I think those who have been really successful, the Steve Jobs of the world, who are very inspirational, who got fired, who got created, when, most of you are too young to remember, there was a time in the world, Apple, of course, one of the biggest successful companies, Michael Dell from Dell said Apple should just liquidate itself, take the cash it has and distribute to shareholders because there isn't a future for it. And it's funny that cash that sits in its bank account at Apple now could buy Dell 10 times over or some radical number. So you can have faith, and faith requires believing in. It cannot be completely, you cannot suddenly say you're going to be a billionaire. That ain't going to happen. But you got to have faith that if you work hard. But you also have luck, and you got to have grace. Luck is a component. Some people leave it all up to God, but I tell people God can't do all your work. You got to be present. You got to be if you don't buy a lottery ticket, you can never win the lottery. So I think some of those are, so it's being prepared and being ready to accept grace. In my case, I had no idea that 200 plus subscribers could potentially become my source of investors when this is all over.
Do you have time for one more question, or?
I am yours until the last question is asked. So, all right.
Amazing. If anyone has to go, because I know some people still have online classes, that's fine. But Jason asks, it seems like your success has come from a lot of trial and error. It's an amazing journey, but was there ever a point where you were afraid?
I'm afraid every single day. I'm afraid that, here's what I'm afraid of 66. I'm going to be 66 in May. What really scares me now is, unlike earlier times when I failed, I don't believe I will have enough years in me to do a second chance. I would have lost enough capital, and I would have lost enough momentum, and my own energy level is not what it was when I was 40. So it is somewhat the fear that gets me up every morning. I was in the office until last night, until 11:30 here at Bauer Street. I came back here at 8:30 to make sure the deliveries went out today. And it was because I didn't want to screw up our customers. And if it was screwed up, it was me, because I screwed up something in the delivery order that people were actually delivering, but it was my list. So fear sits, but I don't fear doesn't cripple me. Fear motivates me to get up and show up and be present. And that's really important. This is not a 40-hour job, being an entrepreneur.
Yep, I definitely agree. All right, Lauren asks, how do you personally define social entrepreneurship, and how has what you have done at Second Chances Farm impacted your own well-being / growth?
I think social entrepreneurship, so I define as my primary mission at Second Chances is to create a new crop of compassionate capitalists, right? So what does that mean? It means, while I want to make money doing at Second Chances Farm, it would be a failure 10 years from now if all I did is make money. I didn't transform the lives of some or many of the returning citizens and made them into capitalists. So part of what we have done here is reserve 10% of our equity, so that when there is a ultimate capital transaction, meaning when we exit an opportunity fund under federal law, is roughly 10 years to get the maximum benefits. So assuming there's an exit at the end of 10 years, which I hope there is, because I'll be 75 if I'm alive, I want to be out of here, is that we have reserved 10% of the equity for our returning citizens. They don't have to pay anything for it. And because you can't be a capitalist without capital. And so that's how, so what is social impact has to be not just giving a job, it has to provide pathways to prosperity, and pathways to prosperity for people who don't have access to capital or credit really requires you to do these things.